City Council Committee on Ordinances, Licenses, and Legal Affairs. Test. I'm just going to do one more test. That's not so bad. Okay. All right. Thank you for everyone who has stuck with us, which is Robert McCarthy. All right, I'll just repeat, just in case anyone didn't hear the first time. We're here to discuss the abandoned and foreclosed properties ordinance. So we have with us Vulis Devrulis and James Wheelock from Beth Renard's office, Assistant City Solicitor. James, I know you played a big part in crafting this change here. Would you be able to, for the council, to sort of go over the rationale behind it and what the major changes were?
Absolutely. We do have an abandoned foreclosed property ordinance already, and in speaking with Bula and members of her department, there were a number of areas where the system that we have in place could be improved. The system that we have captures information from mortgage banks and people interested in property where the property is vacant or abandoned for a significant period of time. But what we are requiring for contact information and how we enforce capturing that information needed some work. So what's happening is a lot of these properties that are vacant for a big period of time or a long period of time do require a lot of attention from municipal employees. We do have to frequent the property. We go by to inspect. There could be neighbor complaints, accumulations of trash. The property could fall into disrepair, threatening neighboring structures. And the longer that the property remains vacant, the bigger the problem becomes. And so the city is spending a significant amount of time on this. I know the building commissioner, the health agent, the fire department, the police department have visited with me in the attorney general's office more than a dozen of these properties over the last year. In order to make this process more streamlined, we should be able to charge fines for mortgage lenders or foreclosing mortgage lenders that aren't keeping their contact information for particular properties up to date. That happens frequently, where we'll be calling one bank and they no longer are interested in the property, or we'll be contacting a point of contact where they're not tasked with maintaining the property. They're just tasked with registering it, and they're not going to pass our message along. That's not a helpful point of contact for this type of ordinance or for the city at all. So we need to make sure that when they're registering, that we're defining who they're registering as their point of contact. This needs to be a person who's capable of responding to the property within a reasonable amount of time. So that was a big change, requiring that contact information is up to date, is posted on the property somewhere, so that if a city personnel are responding to that property, they are able to contact that person. The contact information doesn't need to be tracked down. It's right there. And again, if it's not up to date, we should be able to issue a fine for that. I guess the last couple points are that so before last year, before we adopted 40U, the penalty for not registering was us issuing a ticket, 21D ticket. And if that wasn't paid, really there was nothing that we could do, because we can't arrest Morgan Stanley, right? So now that we've adopted 40U, if they don't register, the fine runs with the land. And so making the fines that are unpaid run with the land will actually be able to collect the money that the city is really spending to monitor these properties. And like I said, the longer they remain vacant, I'm sure you guys get a number of phone calls from your constituents that have vacant or abandoned properties in their neighborhood. They do pose a serious risk to the neighbors. They are a nuisance to the neighbors. And we do spend an awful lot of time and effort on this. So I guess those are the big changes. The updating the registration fee to account for the amount of time and money that is spent on monitoring these. And there aren't that many of them, so the registration fee needed to go up because we're dividing how much this is costing by a smaller number. I think that it makes sense to charge more money the longer a property is abandoned or vacant. It will help move along these mortgage banks that are sometimes just sitting on the property while it's vacant and not doing any work to rehabilitate it, not putting it back on the market and making it available for sale, and requiring that the property be maintained and that we have adequate contact information. So those are the big changes that are being proposed here.
Thank you, James. And I'll just, before I get to questions, I'll just summarize my understanding. Turn the volume down. I'll summarize my understanding of what you just said there. So currently, for an abandoned foreclosed property, it's $300 flat fee annual. The change here would be we would move it to a graduated fee, which would be $500 for properties under a year, $1,000 for 1 to 2 years, $2,000 for 2 to 3, and $3,000 for 3+ years. That's correct?
Yes.
So, yeah. And then the next one is that there is no, we just mentioned, there's no specific really penalty for non-compliance. Now we have a $300 fine per violation, which we are able to enforce. And then there is no specific requirement for a public-facing property manager contact currently, and this will require the property owner to post a 24-hour contact name, address, and phone number in a visible location. Those are the big things that we're looking at here. To Councilor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair Hapworth, and thank you, Mr. Willock, and the other people who worked on this. I'm really excited about this. As the other ward councilors, I have several what you referred to as nuisance properties. I do want to just say that the $300 day is actually $300 per day if it continues, and that a lien can be put on the property, which I think is really good for the city. I think from my perspective, this potentially will free up properties that are not being utilized to some kind of more productive use, be housing or something else. So I'm really excited to move this forward. I do have a couple of questions. These are more grammatical. In the first paragraph, section 1268, it says with the director, but I think we should have director of whatever the department is. And I'm assuming this is the director of inspectional services or building commissioner or something.
Yeah, so director is defined in section 1267. Sorry, I don't know if you can hear me.
Say that again, James. Sorry, I had to turn the volume up.
Sure. The word director is defined in section 1267 as director means director of inspectional services department.
Yeah. I was just thinking we could put that in that paragraph. Mm-hmm. I know this sounds really minute, but wherever director is, it's not capitalized. And I think that's a department head. So I think we should capitalize director. It's in that paragraph, and it's also in the paragraph once the property is no longer abandoned. Just think that the director is actually a title of a person.
So just to be clear, James, you said that director is defined, and we don't have 12-67 in front of us right now, but it is defined in 12-67. Can you repeat what it is defined as in that?
Yes. Director means director of inspectional services department.
Okay, that seems sufficient to me.
I'd like to propose an amendment that we include that full title and make references to director capitalized.
Councilor Marcelo.
Thank you, Chair. I don't agree with that. The whole reason why you define something is so that you don't have to search through for every instance where you're doing it. If it's defined right above what director is, then I think just the use of director within the body of the ordinance makes sense in this case. Capitalizing it, that has to follow some sort of standard. So I'll defer to legal on that, but that's just if it's already defined with a department, then it should be sufficient.
I could just follow up. I'm okay with that.
Councilor Cohen.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just want to follow up. I'll withdraw the first part, but there are references to director that capitalized and some that are not.
That's
I
fine.
know that seems
Consistency. That's fine.
I can run this by, actually, James, do you have thoughts on whether that should be capitalized in here or if it would make a difference in here?
I've seen it both ways. The defined term has it capitalized. I don't think that it's ambiguous as it reads. I think that since the word is defined above, but I see your point that, it could be consistent.
Seems like an easy change to make if needed. Councilor Varela.
Thank you.
On the same topic. Okay. Councilor Varela.
Thank you, Chair Hepworth. Through you to Assistant Solicitor James Wheelock. Concerning Section 1268, the registration fees, is that reference from general law, or is that something that you guys came up with for the 1 year, less than 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 year?
Sure. So when looking into this, we're not the only municipality that has an abandoned foreclosed property ordinance. And so I surveyed a bunch of other municipalities to see where our fee sat in relationship to the others. And we are the lowest. I really liked the graduated fee structure of another municipality because it does make sense that the longer the property sits vacant, the more time and effort is spent on it because there are more problems. And so that's why this was what was recommended. I know that Vula did. I did speak with Vula and some of the other staff members on how much time was spent so that we could come up with a reasonable estimate of how much this is actually costing the city for us to be monitoring all of these properties. And so that was the impetus for it.
And probably go ahead. Okay. Probably something I should have asked also before the meeting. Do we have a listing of what these fees are going to pay for to show that they match up?
I don't know that I have a listing. I do know that we have a software program that we're going to have to be modifying. We do have some staff time, both clerk staff time, inspector staff time, my time. Those are the costs that we're going to bear, whether they're going to be, paying for it or not. So the idea of it is, since we're doing this, for basically providing the service, that they should be paying for it since they're the ones that are benefiting from it. I just found my list of the other municipalities and their fines or their registration fees. Worcester charges $3,000 per year. Gloucester charges $2,500. Lowell charges $1,000. So we were definitely on the low end.
Possibly we could work with Vula maybe to make sure we understand what exactly those fees are going to cover before we bring this back to the full council. Councilor Marcelo.
Thank you, Chair. I have questions for Mr. Brula, if you want to come up. And I'm going to be referencing this list that came from the mayor earlier today of all the abandoned and foreclosed properties. If you could start by just helping me understand what all of this means. We have a record number, which I believe is an internal number for the city.
Yep. So when they register the property, either the banks or whoever is registering the abandoned or foreclosed property, it comes up with the number. And then if you see it a couple of times, it could be they re-register it because another company takes over. I was trying to look at it because Janet in my office got this together so we can have an idea how many properties we've dealt with in the last couple of years.
So each time for each property, as it has a new entry, it's because it's switched foreclosure
new
companies
owner,
or
yes.
new. Okay. And the foreclosure company is the new owner of the property.
Exactly.
Okay. And then we have the applicant name, which
some of the applicants could be from the mortgage company, it could be the bank or who they hire to do the registration for them. And then we don't hear from them. And that's what we're coming and finding a lot of the properties that no one's following through. Like James said, no one's maintaining them. We don't know who to call. We call them, but the person that registered it, but they're not the people that are maintaining it. So now we're doing a witch hunt. Then we go there and then it'll be all the teams from health, fire, building to make sure that they're code compliant because we get complaints or we notice that, this property is a danger. I've had buildings that are boarded because no one's there. I had one recently that they didn't register because someone passed away on Prescott Street. So for a year, we were trying to locate someone. No one came forward. I had the property boarded. They got in there. I was worried. We had police go down there. We had the AG. We spent countless hours at the $500 wouldn't even cover the one day that we went there. So for a year, we spent a lot of time on these properties to make sure they're maintained until we can properly find the owners or to see what direction they're going to go in.
Okay, so but sometimes when properties go into foreclosure, the original owners are still in the property.
But they're not technically, I think, and James can correct me, I don't know the process. I think at that point, when it's in foreclosure, it's the bank that owns it at that point, until they can come up with the money to come out of foreclosure. So we're not getting the fees who has to register it. It'll be either the banks or the mortgage company, whoever owns the property or the title to it at the point, because there's money owed to it.
Okay, I think my question, just to follow up, is if the original owners are still in the house, then it's not really an example of a house that's abandoned and somebody could buy it and live in it. There's a family in it. And so that's what I'm trying to are we still charging the company $1,000 and $2,000 per year while they're trying to work through foreclosure? And are any of those fees going to be put onto the owner of the property when they try to get out of foreclosure, which is just going to add to...
I'm not sure legally how that would be added on there. I'm assuming.
James, do you know?
So sure. So foreclosure is a process, and it starts, and often a family that's living there is still living there. The fee for registering it falls on the mortgage bank, the registration fee, as it's defined in the ordinance. So they're the ones that would be responsible for paying that. At some point, in the foreclosure process, there is an eviction process that happens. And I guess my response, so what you're foreseeing is that someone is able to redeem and stay in their home. Are they going to be on the hook for this fee? Not directly, because it would be a fee charged to the mortgage bank. Could the mortgage bank add that to their the total amount of mortgage owed? Probably.
Okay. In the case of a house that's in foreclosure, with a family still, the original owner still living in it, what is the city's responsibility? How is the city responding? What's the impact on the city? What's the impact?
Our biggest thing is just to make sure that these companies are maintaining it. Just because they've started a foreclosure or an abandonment on it, it doesn't mean they're not responsible anymore, because the owners obviously might not maintain it. So we have to make sure that it's maintained because of the other surrounding properties and the neighbors. Sometimes, they overgrowth, no trash, no removal of snow, it's falling apart, porches collapse and things like that. There's a lot of different reasons why the city gets involved.
Okay. Can we switch now to 80 Wilson Street? This is a case for my fellow counselors where there was a house there. It was bought by someone who tore it down. City put in a stop work order because they didn't have the proper permits to go forward, didn't have the proper permits to pull the house down. It is now an abandoned, by my definition, a foundation. So is that considered an abandoned property at this point?
Actually, the contractor was in and it was in engineering for a little bit. So it took a little bit for them to get what engineering needed. And they just committed to put in whatever they need for engineering. And now I'm going to go forward with the permit and reviewing their building permit. So hoping it's not going to. If it was, then we'd get the AG involved, if they totally just left it that way and didn't do anything. They have been communicating with me. They just need to do a bunch of things for different departments that they didn't do initially, that they weren't aware of the owner.
Okay.
So I'm trying to work with them in the sense.
I mean, it's been a long time. It is a blight on the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And it is also not secured, by the way. The fence that's there is it's not stopping anyone. And I think that is a safety problem in that neighborhood, especially now that, the leaves are off the trees. You can look right into that property and the fence means nothing. I think that, I just think that needs to be enforced a little bit more.
I reach out to them on that.
Yeah.
I did reach out to start the permitting process again, actually on Monday.
Do they have it? Like, this is a property that I could see the city coming down on and saying, this is abandoned. Like, you guys need to do something. When do we start charging them for not moving forward? I guess is my question. It's abandoned.
They've are working with various departments, and the engineering department was the biggest one right now that had a little bit of a delay, which I understand because they have to do new sewer, new lines, or whatever they're having them do. So now they had to get an engineer and everyone to show them the plan. So I think that delayed the process. So if someone's trying, I'm not going to push and find them. If they didn't communicate with us at all and they weren't working with engineering, then I would start a process of sending a letter that they're not communicating and working with us. And then we would start the process of abandonment and then finding them. I couldn't find someone that's trying. If they didn't put permits in and try with engineering or our the other department's health, everybody in fire, they've been working with every department. It's just a longer process. I think financially they got into more than they thought.
All right.
No, but I understand frustration. Trust me, I was frustrated. It took me a long time to get the fence over there.
So just to understand your question, the question is, how do we define abandoned? Is that where we're at right now?
Yeah.
Is it, you have the answer?
I do.
Councilor Perrella.
Thank you, Chair Hepworth. I did talk to our city solicitor, Beth Renard, about this in detail, not about this, but about some specificities. When it comes to the definition of abandonment, it's very broad. And if the applicant is attempting to try to fix the problem, they have 2 years to do that. So if they do stay in touch with various departments and are attempting, that abandonment clock it just starts over to 2 years if they're in touch with each department. So it's a very broad term that I think the hands are tied between the building department and our solicitor when it comes to the definition of abandonment. It means no communication on attempt for 2 years. Like, so that's a very, it's actually unreasonable.
So
I could find them, but I was trying not to go too direct because they are trying to work with me in my department when I've communicated with them. I mean, it took them a little bit longer for the fence, but.
Councilor Watson. Are you good, Councilor Marcel? Councilor Watson.
Thank you, Chair Hepworth. So it sounds like the question that I'm hearing is, at what point after not hearing anything does that clock begin? Are you saying it has to be silent for 2 years? No. What's that? That's the answer I think we're trying to get. Sorry.
So example, the house came down. We knew about it because it was a miscommunication. It was supposed to be an interior demo. Then it did exterior. They thought they communicated with each department. With us, they were okay, but they didn't get the approval from the other ones and it went down. Acknowledge that going forward, we've been communicating. If I sent a letter and said you needed to go see engineering, health, fire, and all the departments, they did not. At that point, I would send another letter. And first, it's your
That's
warning.
the question. Yep. What you just said is, if I sent a letter and said they needed to do X, Y, and Z, and they did not, what is the period between receiving the letter and not taking action where you then take the next action?
So it would be a timeline. So I could say within 10 days, you need to communicate to my office. It varies. Sometimes I say as soon as you receive the letter because it's something egregious.
Right.
Like that case.
So you have discretion as the inspectional director to set that timeline, and it could be immediately. It could be 10 months theoretically, right? Like it could be you have all that discretion.
And if they've created a violation, then I have the right to, especially zoning or any building, if they did the work without a permit, we can set violation tickets.
Mm-hmm.
And then we do 1, 2, 3, you keep doing up to a point. And then I would communicate with Beth or James, and then we'd do the next step to try and get them in court if they're not working with us to do stuff.
I just pause us here real quick. James, if we determined a property was abandoned, and the owner came back and said, it's not abandoned. I was about to respond to VULA and I'm not going to pay this fee, because it's not an abandoned property. What is it at the discretion of the building inspector? Would that hold up in court? And I guess maybe if you could speak to that before we move on in the conversation.
Sure. So abandonment in the ordinance has some criteria. There's some evidence of abandonment, meaning conditions that would lead, the building inspector to believe that the property is vacant, has been for a while, and that there's no interested party that is making good faith efforts to make the property habitable and occupiable. I think that it would hold up in court. I think that the timeline is shorter than 2 years. The timeline that I have is 45 days. And in this ordinance change, one of the aspects of it is adding an appeal process. So any owner that is assessed a registration fee under this ordinance, they'll have the right to appeal the imposition of that fee to the municipal hearing officer. So we have an administrative remedy that they can seek that way.
Sure. Make sure I'm understanding. There is language defining what an abandoned property is earlier in the ordinance that we don't have in front of us.
Yes.
Okay. So we'll just send that out to the council after this meeting. But as a lawyer, you feel comfortable with the language that we have here and the way that we're moving forward with this.
Yes.
Okay. Who's next? Councilor Jerslow.
Thank you, Chair. I don't have a problem with the abandoned part of the part, but the foreclosure, I know some people on this list, they're elderly, they're disabled, and they're still in the house, but I don't know how long they've actually been on the list. It looks like a couple times, but I would hate to see them actually, now the mortgage company put more, fees on them, and they're trying to get, out of debt. Does the city go to them with any programs or anything to try to help them stay? The people have stayed in this house, have been there forever, elderly, disabled, they're just fallen on tough times. Does the city help them at all? I know we were out of our house displaced over 6 months. We were flooded out in 2018. And we were close to foreclosure only because we were trying to get back into the house, spending all our money. And I can see something like that happening and getting on this list. And, it's kind of almost embarrassing for them. And also if the mortgage came to us, the mortgage company said, yeah, we're going to put more fees on you. So what does the city do to help? I know they help businesses get big tax breaks in the city. What are they doing to the actual residents to help them to get to stay in their homes? I think that's what everybody's trying to get, housing for everybody. What is the city doing actually to help these people stay in their homes?
I'm not sure. I'm sure if they went to the planning department, there's programs that can assist with, their homes that if they qualify. There are programs there that Naomi and the various people in the planning department can assist them with. That wouldn't be our department. We're more to maintain a property and keep it safe, along with fire and other departments. That would be more our department. They just get registered because we monitor properties because we get the calls about maintenance.
I know that, but on this list, now would you send them a letter saying they?
It wouldn't be them directly. It would be to the company that owns the property technically, the mortgage or finance company.
The residents would incur another fee, top of trying to get out from their foreclosure. I just don't. That's less than a year. Things can happen really bad, really quick sometimes to people that they get. I think that's foreclosure less than a year. It's kind of harsh, I think. They change that at all? Or, I think less than a year. You miss a few of your payments.
But the foreclosure process and abandonment wouldn't be with us. It would be what they signed up, with their finance company. We're just more
this is less than a year of foreclosure. So,
well, between, up to the 11 months, 9, whatever days, and it would be the $500 fee. But then now when you go into a second year and then we have to keep going to the property, it's costing the city money because, example, 22 Prescott was not registered and because someone passed away and we've been there a ton of times. And it took a lot of resources to be down there. We probably spent, I bet you, over $6,000 in taxpayers' money to go down there between all the departments.
And just to back up to what we had initially discussed, the purpose of the ordinance, would you say is fair to say that the purpose is there's a cost, an actual monetary cost to the city that the taxpayers of Salem are paying for these properties that are owned by banks or by somebody else who is not maintaining them and has abandoned them, or they're in a foreclosure state, and that these fees are paying for things that were previously being paid for by the taxpayers of Salem. Is that fair to say? Are you good on your side, Councilor Jerslow? Yeah. Sure. And just to be clear to everyone in this committee, you can make motions to change anything that's in this ordinance. Councilor Cohen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Hepworth. So I first want to address what Councilor Jerslow said. I have several properties in my neighborhood actually that are in this situation, and there's actually quite a bit of state funding that helps people who are in this situation. I don't want to see anyone displaced or anyone to be caused anything. There's a particular fund that only can be used if you are in danger of being foreclosed on. So there are funds that actually are meant to help people. I don't want to put any more work on Laurie Stewart because we're always talking about it, but one of the really big benefits of the free legal advice that the city provides is not just for tenants, but for landlords that are in situations like this. No one becomes foreclosed on if they don't pay the rent for 2 months. There's a whole process of that happening. But I have a neighbor across the street from me who, as soon as, went into the foreclosure process, and James alluded to it, that there's an eviction process, was actually able to qualify for money to help them actually get to a place where they could potentially keep the property. I also just wanted to mention just briefly that our health agent is very involved in some of these. So that's really a bunch of the cost. I have a property where, all the neighbors are telling me, it's overgrown. There's move out and haven't moved the stuff. And just like the building commissioner does, I've seen, as I think we've all gotten these letters where it says, you have so many days to, remove the stuff, and it attaches what the fines will be on that. But I just want to be very clear that there are funds, significant funds, to help people who are in jeopardy of losing their home to keep their home. I don't want people, whatever their situation is, if they're able to if some funding would enable them to stay in their home or keep their property. Unfortunately, many of these are, fortunately, the landlord who owns the house next to my multifamily also owns a really bad problem property on Salem Street, and has actually said doesn't know who the tenants are, literally will rent to people and make a bunch of money while the property is not healthy for the people who are living there. So I'm also concerned about, that. I mean, Councilor Marcillo is talking to the one on Wilson Street, kids walking through that property could get, hurt or whatever. So, but I just want to reinforce, there are funds, significant funds, or different kinds of monies that are available to people who are in danger of being foreclosed on.
Councilor Marcillo.
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm also struggling with the foreclosed properties where the original owners are still living in the property. I mean, when I went through this list, I don't know, several are in my ward. I wouldn't have known that they were foreclosed. As far as I know, they're being taken care of by somebody, either the mortgage company that owns it or the people who are living there. So I don't have enough information yet to understand that part of the foreclosed properties being charged this amount. And maybe we could get some more data from your department, the health department, the police department of these properties. Have there been complaints? Have there been nuisance complaints? Have there been violations of city ordinance? Because maybe the mortgage company owns the property and isn't taking care of it. I'm not there yet on those, but do you know offhand, I know that you didn't make this list.
No, so
How many of them are actually abandoned where no one is on the property? No one is living there?
I couldn't answer tonight that question. I don't know.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Varela and then Councilor Watson-Felt.
Thank you, Chair Hepworth. I just wanted to clean up my statement. I did look and verify Chapter 200A of General Law, and when it comes to my statement, I was talking about a use. A use is 2 years. Concerning abandonment of a property under General Law, it's 3 years of abandonment of the actual property. After those 3 years, then it's considered abandoned, and that means no correspondence with the owner of the property. I guess that leads me to my question here. When in writing this ordinance, I know this is about regulating the maintenance. When it comes to the registration fees, it kind of ends at 3 years or more. Through you to James, was there a reason how you guys wrote this and maybe consistent with the general law of abandonment for homes?
No, I didn't reference the definition of abandonment from general law. The definition was already provided in the ordinance and how we were using the term in the ordinance.
All right, thank you.
Councilor Watson-Felt.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to offer some comments of agreement with Councilor Marcillo's points around. I would like to know how many of these are abandoned, how long they've been abandoned, and the data around violations, complaints. I think it would be really helpful. I also struggle with the concept of, let me start by saying I think violations, obviously, we have mechanisms for enforcing violations regardless, right, of the state of the property. And so I am a little concerned about foreclosures where families are still living in those homes, although I do appreciate there's a lot of programs that can support that. So yeah, I think I just need a little more data on it. I think the other thing that's on my mind is this concept of defining abandoned properties and allowable amounts of communication. You know, there are certain properties that are not on this list that I have big problems with. You know what I mean? Like,
Not abandoned them.
but well, you know, let's talk about 5 Broad Street. 5 Broad Street's not on this list. 5 Broad Street is owned. I guarantee they've been in communication. It has been no one has lived in that building since it was the Council on Aging. No one's been in that building on a day-to-day basis since it was the Council on Aging. That was 16 years ago. The building continues to deteriorate. The building continues to be, you know, jumped through hoops around who owns it and what they're going to do with it and plans. They've even gone so far as to have, you know, neighborhood meetings around design and approvals through various boards. And yet windows are breaking. People are on the property. Their illegal activity is there. It's becoming a nuisance. There's security concerns and questions. The activity that goes on there is a massive nuisance to immediate abutters and neighbors. So like, I am like, instead of hurting families that are living in foreclosed properties, I would like to figure out what we do about that, because that has been purchased for housing. That is intended to be housing. That has been an empty building for 17 years, and I am over it. So why isn't that building considered abandoned, or there's being some level of expectation around something happening with that building for further security and for further conversion for 17 years. Do you know what I mean? And I know that's not the topic of this conversation, but I am like, that's where I'm coming from a little bit, which is like, I need data. I need to better understand. And yeah, I just generally, I am in support of this. I am definitely in support of this. Generally speaking, I would like some more data, and I have bigger questions. Thank you.
Councilor Varela.
When you're ready, I'd like to make a motion.
Councilor Marcillo.
Thank you, Chair. I can ditto. 5 Broad Street is still city owned, and that's the problem, right? I have a problem with foreclosed properties where families are living there, and as far as I know, they're not a burden on the city as we're talking about this ordinance. But that building is a burden on my neighborhood. It is a burden, and the city owns it. And as far as I know, it's supposed to be changing hands this week, but that was hopefully, right? Like, that's a problem. Like, if we're going to do this, we need to do it for city-owned properties too, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. So.
Before we are there any more comments before we, I guess, summarize some of these questions and asks and then take a motion? Any other comments? Councillor Cohen.
Yeah, I think having more information, would inform us better. But I think one of the questions I have is, I know I have 7 properties that are on the list, and I know people who live in 4 of them. And they're not all the families that are being foreclosed on. So I don't know how we can, gather that information, because as I said before, I don't want people who are living in a property who have a chance to, get to a better place and keep the property to be penalized. I don't. But I also feel like sometimes the new owner of the property is not, really respective of the neighborhood or even the tenants, because the landlord I'm talking about had Section 8, is really upset, told me was very upset because Lawrence Section 8, Lawrence Housing, told him he had to make sure the stove was working. And I thought, why are you telling me this? Because that is outrageous. If, that we have landlords, that's one reason we're doing the, inspections, through the health department, is because we have a lot of properties where people are living in there. And I'm afraid a lot of the abandoned foreclosed properties are really unsafe places for people who are in there. And also for the neighborhood, because, there's kids and people who walk around and stuff like that. So that's the thing to me. I don't know, the ones that I'm looking at that are in my ward exactly. I just know that some of them are not the owners of the property. And I was actually surprised at a couple of these. As Councilor Marcelo said, there's one of the ones on the list is like a big fancy mansion in my ward, and I don't have a lot of those. So I do feel like more information is helpful, but I do want to be careful that we're like structuring this so that, there's a reason for this. And we may not be in the place to vote on it now, but I think some of these things could inform us on how to maybe potentially change the language.
I just wanted to say also why we're here is because James felt our frustration. Janet in my office spends lots of time because she sees them coming in. People don't deregister them. There's new owners. We have problems. We get calls, violations. So we wanted to find a way that we'll spend a lot of time and resources from every department, between health, fire, building. We're going, not saying all the properties on there, but you can't say which one you're going to do this. It's going to be across the board once it goes into that direction, because it's the mortgage companies. And I know it's frustrating if somebody's living in there. If we could figure out a way, I'm not sure, but it's frustrating for our departments too, because we're trying to do our regular job and then we're taking care of like other people's properties, which is what our job is, but it gets frustrating. And as you know, you're emailing me, you're calling me, and each department, we have a limited staff and we try to maintain the property so nobody gets hurt and so other people can enjoy their neighborhood. So that was the biggest reason why we came here, thinking these companies like mortgage companies and other companies that take over, but don't do anything to maintain the property, and it should be their cost.
Councilor Marcelo, and then Councilor Jerslow.
I have one other question. We're asking you for a lot more information, and just something that entered my mind is, can you differentiate between single-family homes and multifamily homes? I'm trying to figure out like the nuisance properties that go into foreclosure and the mortgage companies aren't keeping them up.
We had one recently up in Witchcraft Heights. The lady went, I think, in a nursing home, so it was abandoned, and the mortgage company maintained it.
So that would be an abandoned property in my mind. There's no one living there.
Living there.
Right. But of the foreclosed properties where people are living there, right? Can we get a breakdown of complaints or issues from the city where the owner is still living in the house versus a rental property where nobody really has any skin in the game living in that house? They're just renters. And
we had one recently off of, I think the exact address, and now it was bought, but we were going there with fire. It was off Canal Street. Underneath the bridge, was it over there? I'm trying to think. Well, Jefferson, I forget the address. There you go. Parallel, there you go.
so that was, sorry, what was the?
In foreclosure, the family, and then they called after. I don't know the whole situation, legally what happened, but new owners because it was sold, but multiple times there, fire, health, building, all of us going down there, spending time. But if these companies, they didn't even deregister and it was sold. So this is our frustration. We don't know when they're changing hands. We don't know who's maintaining it. It took us a while to find out who the company was. Then it was a realtor. So we do a lot of information we try to find.
And deregistering means that the foreclosure company says that it's been sold.
It's sold, exactly.
And so they're, okay.
Who the new owners are and who's going to maintain the property.
So part of this ordinance is to try to crack down on the keeping the record straight as far as the foreclosure company is concerned and keeping them straight with the city.
And to put the information that each building should have, like especially if no one's in the building and then police go there because they get a call or fire or ourselves, and we know who to contact.
Right. And that would be for an abandoned, nobody living their property. Okay.
Councilor Jerslow. So I think there's a general, I think we all recognize, or most of us recognize, we want to create incentives for people to do something with abandoned properties because it's bad for the neighborhood. It's bad for our housing crisis. Sounds like the group here has questions that need to be answered and want some data here. So I'm just going to summarize what I have here, but if I've forgot anything or missed anything, please let me know. So first question about what do the fees pay for? So just a breakdown, either to James or to Vula, it's a breakdown of what these would be paying for. Clarity around the abandoned language. I think we could probably find that pretty easily, but if we can grab that and send that out to the council. Data on abandoned properties. So I think both Councilor Watson-Felt and Councilor Morsillo just wanted to understand better what these abandoned properties were. I think, was there anything else around that data that you were looking for? Like violations. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify, public safety reports, violations on record, and I think the distinction between foreclosed versus abandoned from the list. So separating those two into two different columns. Anything else, Councilor Morsillo?
Okay.
Thank you.
And then there's a question from Councilor Morsillo about just city properties. So I guess an understanding of why a city property could make its way onto this list, or if it wouldn't make its way onto this list, or why. I guess that question, like what separates Five Broad from somebody else? Maybe just an understanding of how we deal with city properties. Councilor Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. Of the 7 in Ward 5, 5 of them are multifamily. And Councilor Morsillo brought up, in many cases, those could have been in foreclosure or something and are still operating as an income property for the owner. So it might be good to know, because obviously if it's a single family being foreclosed on, to Councilor Jerslow's point, it might actually be someone who is trying to survive. So I think if we had some kind of quantitative idea of what percentage of multifamilies there are.
And then last and most importantly, capitalizing the letter D. I think we're good.
Yes, very important. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else I missed there around this conversation? I appreciate this conversation. I think we want to make sure, obviously, we don't want to hurt somebody inadvertently here in trying to do the right thing for the city. Any other questions? Any motions? Councilor Varela.
Thank you, Chair Halperth. Since we have so many other questions with this, I move that this remain in committee.
Second.
Councilor Varela moves to remain in committee, second by Councilor Marcillo. All those in favor? Any opposed? Matter carries. Councilor Varela.
Thank you, Chair Halperth. Motion to adjourn.
Councilor Varela moves to adjourn. All those in favor? Any opposed? Matter carries. Thank you. Thank you, Bula. Thank you, James.